what do I want to say?
Reporter.
A reporter to you to tell you about things. Instead, you've got the students talking to each other, reading to each other. We had flashcards, for instance, and this was the way part of the school would be run. Two kids, say two third graders, raise a hand. Incidentally, that's an important thing. How did you get the teacher's attention? You raised your hand. And the teacher would say, can Donald and I do fractions? And then you would get in a big seat with Donald and you would do the fractions. And you would teach each other this way. And that was a great way. The kids taught each other, and they'd be very quiet while they did it so they didn't disturb. If you were very, very good and finished early, you got to play in the sandbox and the sand table. The sand table was a real treat. But you had, and I keep using the word harmony because I hadn't thought of it before, but that's what you have. The little ones learning from the big ones, and the big ones feeling good about that, and there's a repetition that you hear over and over, so that when I remember sitting in 4th grade listening to the 8th grade history classes, and history was not my favorite. I didn't like early history, but I liked later history.
Why didn't you like early history?
I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, now during this time you had the Great Depression.
Yes. Yes.
And how did that affect what went on in the classroom? Did it affect what went on in the classroom?
Well, it definitely did, because anybody who got a new pair of shoes, they stood out like crazy. Normally you got one pair of shoes in the fall, but you went to school barefoot as long as you could. And then only when the cold weather would you put your shoes on. On the kind of food that is, for instance, the Kelly family she had a baby every year. The Kelly family had about 8 kids, and they sometimes would bring nothing but soybeans to school. And that was a big show. And we'd all sort of cut a little bit off our sandwiches and slip them and cut your apple up. I forgot what else we put in there. We put an apple. Frequently we put an apple.
Did you really bring an apple to the teacher?
Yes, we did.
Why? Why would everybody bring
it? Or we'd bring a cookie.
What, just to be nice?
Just to be nice. If it was especially pretty. You wouldn't take a Salome apple, or you would take a big red delicious apple, or a big yellow delicious apple, or a big greening apple. But you wouldn't take a Salome or a wealthy apple.
So it had to look good.
It had to look special, and you'd polish it. And that's for the polishing apple. You polish it on your dress.
The teacher could end up with like 10 apples, right?
No. And then she would eat the apple, and she would cut it and share it too.
Wow.
She would share it.
Well, how do you think that got started, bringing the apple to the teacher?
Somebody looked at an apple and thought of their teacher. And apples in Iowa are so abundant in the fall. Another fruit, incidentally, and this was another on the way home thing. As you walked home, there was a grove of plums, wild plums. They were wild plums, and we would stop and eat about 50 plums apiece, because they just carpeted the ground. They were so sweet and so delicious. They were about the size of a huge olive.
So this is about 4 o'clock?
This is about 4 o'clock.
That's a good snack.
4:30 in the afternoon.
That's it.
4:30. There's something else about the way home that I wanted to mention. When the way home is an hour talk all by itself, because we little kids very much respected the big kids, and we would walk quite silently most of the time, because we wanted to hear what they had to say, and they would teach us naughty verses, and they would use profanity, which was absolutely forbidden
in school.
And they knew that we all liked to swear, because it upset the adults so much. And
But you didn't do it in school?
oh, never, never, never. Because the teacher would probably even put you in the hall for that.
So when on your walk home, did you talk about what happened in school?
We talk about what happened in school. We talked, well, for one thing, there was so much wildlife. Sometimes we would catch a snake. We caught blue racers, garter snakes, and there was a little green one, and I don't know what he was. They never had a
Now,
name
did
for
they
him.
teach you biology in school? Did they take the lessons of what you were seeing outside?
Absolutely not.
So
Absolutely not. Sex, I mean, if there's one thing criminal and neglectful, it was the lack of any education. When I got into high school, they started to teach us a little bit, but boy, it was woeful.
So there was no biology at all. I'm not just talking about
I'm
sex
trying to
education. I'm talking about how the cell worked, how
I don't remember.
because you're farm kids, and yet they didn't talk about that in the classroom.
Well, you got enough of that. I'll
Right.
tell you, I can disjoint a chicken blindfolded, and I can tell you where the gizzard is. I got a huge kick out of my husband, Harry, who was a city boy, who thought the wishbone was in the tail end of the chicken.
Oh.
And I showed him where the wishbone was. That's where the wishbone is.
That's great.
So we had, biology was taught at home, really,
Okay.
in its own way. We were taught health. Health was biology.
And what was that? Being clean?
Being clean primarily, but nobody ever mentioned difference between the sexes.
Okay.
But I must tell you this. We knew there was a difference between the sexes, but girls, I think the boys talked about it a lot more than we did. But we girls would sometimes peek at the boys. I know my sister Avis and I caught my young brother. We knew they had some gubbery between their legs that we didn't have. And we thought we were nice and smooth and pretty down there, but we thought it was awful because occasionally we'd catch a glimpse, but not ever to see any. But we thought our two brothers, Jack and John, were writing Merry Xmas by peeing in the snow.
This is not at school.
Not at school.
Okay.
That was off beside the chicken.
Okay.
On the
Let's
farm.
go back to school.
Anyway, the sex education was woefully
not happening in school. What about world events? You were on the cusp of World War II. A lot of stuff was happening.
That's
in Europe.
too late. World War II came after I got through high school. Then the stuff too far away from rural school.
Okay.
World events. The only world events were the Depression.
Okay.
We knew about the Depression, and our family was very political, and Grandpa was a raving Franklin D. Roosevelt fan.
No, but in school, did they talk about?
We did not talk about politics in school. We were taught government.
Okay.
You ought to see the test in government here.
Okay, so we're going to do that. Let's do that. Millie has an exam. Why don't you explain what you have?
I have the 8th grade State of Iowa Department of Public Education 8th grade examination, and you had to pass this to get out of rural school.
And how did you get a hold of this?
A marvelous gentleman named, I believe, William Sherman. His last name is Sherman. He and his wife have bent their efforts to save rural schools in Iowa, and he contacted me, and then we got to emailing each other, and he sent this to me. I didn't even know about this because I never had to pass this, because I was in town school in the spring when this was given.
Okay.
So I never had to pass this.
This date is May 1st, 1942. This is the reading comprehension part, and you had some math, and you had a great question about acres and.
I just thought, just show you one question
Sure.
on percentages. This does reading comprehension, vocabulary, spelling, usage, grammar, arithmetic, social studies, geography, science, and health. That's what this consists of. It's, I believe, 18, 19 pages long. But here's a percentage question that I thought might tickle some people. And here's one of the questions, and it's on page 10. And is a farm has 25 acres of pasture, 60 acres of corn, 40 acres of oats, and 15 acres of hay. What percent of the farm is in oats? Figure that out. That's a good question. And that's the level of this test. And I think it's a dandy one. Okay.
Okay, so you talked before, you said this gentleman is trying to preserve rural schools?
Well,
what does that mean?
No, what they wanted to do is preserve, they wanted to get a history of them, is what I should say. And he has a compendium, I'm not sure that, I think his wife also, a compendium of how many schools there were and what the salary was. Did I talk about salary earlier?
Yeah.
Because I think that's interesting. The salary in 1902, I believe, was $30.
So when we talk about, we're going to wrap up now. But
all right.
what about,
now, you didn't talk about...
Yeah, well, if they want more, they'll come back to us, because we could just go on. We could go
Yeah.
on forever here.
Yeah.
I see another 3 hours. But we're gonna wrap up this segment. We may come back and do another thing.
All right.
Okay. So you talk about preserving rural schools, but there's
No, there are no. I think there are no working rural schools in Iowa at this point, and Iowa had more rural schools than I think any state in the nation. I don't even know the number, but I probably could find it in Mr. Sherman's book.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is we're looking, a lot of us are looking at this nostalgically, and I'm wondering if we should do that, or if there's a way to take what we had and bring it into the present.
You know what I think? I think the closest to it is homeschooling.
Okay.
But I do think that I think there's a real advantage. Don't talk economics, the school economics, to having 8 grades in one room. I think there is a huge advantage to that, psychologically, and just the learning. Think of this. In the schools we have today, you've got a teacher standing up in front of the kids as if all kids were created equal, all kids learn at the same level. They don't.
Right.
Holy cow, there was one kid in our class who didn't learn to read. He was in 5th grade. And then he just blossomed.
Wow.
That was Daryl.
That was terrible.
But he suddenly got it.
Wow.
And I think it was the rural school. He may never have learned it.
Do we know what happened to Daryl? Do we know what profession he
Don't
went to? We don't know.
But I do know that my mother told me that she did have, as a student, a scholar, the big scholars. What's the big scholar? I can't remember. That goes to England.
Not Fulbright.
Yeah, Fulbright.
Is it a Fulbright?
A Fulbright.
Okay.
She had a student who became a
Fulbright scholar.
Yeah,
that was the era when
Fulbright
set it up in Arkansas. Okay, I'm going to end with a quote, and we can come back and do more stuff, but I think we've just got a huge swath of stuff right now. Okay, I'm going to end it with a quote. This is from a man named Wayne Fuller, who wrote a book called One Room Schools of the Middle West. Okay, and I'm just going to read this, and then you can respond to it, and we'll finish up. And he says, "The Midwest's one-room schools were the most democratic in the nation. Located in small independent school districts, they were sustained with the barest of resources by civic-minded farmers who voted taxes, set budgets, built schools, elected school boards, hired teachers, and approved curricula. Their efforts virtually wiped out illiteracy, strengthen their children's devotion to democracy, and opened up new vistas beyond the borders of their lives. As a democratic institution, I never thought of a one-room schoolhouse as an example or a microcosm of democracy. Do you think that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
Gee, let me think.
Was it a democracy?
No.
Okay.
There were democracy in the schools and in families did not exist in my day. They would have they would have really laughed ha ha if you had said it's a democracy, isn't it? You respected and obeyed your parents. You respected and obeyed your teachers. You respected and obeyed any elder, all elders. I don't care who it was. You respected them, and their say went. And it was really, don't do as I say, or don't do as I do, you do as I say.
Okay, so it wasn't a democracy for the kids.
No way.
For the people that set up the school system, the farmers, the teachers, the school board, was that a democracy?
That was a democracy. That was a democracy. They would vote for school boards. You would run for school board. I mean, you really would. You'd take your team and you'd go and knock on doors. Grandpa was president of the school board of Monroe Township at one time. He raised teacher salaries. Of course, his two daughters were teachers, but he did see that the teachers got a little higher paid. But I would not call the schools nor the families democratic in those days.
Okay. Now, he also says it opened up new vistas beyond the borders of your lives. Did it open up new vistas? It sounds like the wildlife. It sounds like the walks to and from opened up the vistas. But did what happened in the schoolroom open up new vistas?
I would reiterate that the walks to school were as important as the school day. And I cannot dwell enough on that because when I think of the nature education I got, it was amazing. And what I learned, now tell me the question again.
But he's saying that these one-room schools opened up new vistas beyond the borders of your lives.
Yes, because first of all, music. And then the history lessons and the geography lessons that we had. And just meeting people. See, you didn't have a chance on the farm to meet very many people. But you did in school, and I think that that's true. And of course, I loved stories and I loved English, and that launched me into my career as an English teacher, because and you know, Emily Dickinson said, "There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away," and she's right. And that's where that opens your horizons. Learning to read is opening up your horizons.
So I have one final question for this segment.
Okay.
You were a teacher and a professor.
Yes.
What that you learned in the one-room schoolhouse? What techniques? What characters of the teachers you admired? What qualities of education did you bring to your own work, even decades later?
Never even thought of that very much. But I guess it was the fact to realize that the kids were real people, realizing that the kids were human beings, for one thing. And also to be one with them. That's what we learned in country school, that you were not better. No one was better than anybody else in country school. And that may have been why this person called it a democracy. In that way, it was a democracy, but the teacher called the shots at all times, and a look or just would bring everybody to attention. Oh, one thing we didn't do, talk about how you ended.
Okay. How you ended? You mean how you ended the school day?
How you ended the school day.
Okay.
And in our school, that was ritual. She would say, "Okay, students, put your books away." And you would all do that and stand by your desk, and we'd all stand there, and then we would sing, "Work for the night is coming," and now the day is over. And we did that every single day through 8th grade.
Yeah.
Sing those 2 songs. And that was it.
Do you want to give us some lyrics? You know, sing.
I wrote them down because I was afraid I couldn't remember them if I got, let's see if I can find them. I know there